Yes, Mr. Dube, we welcome you back to the interview room. I'll ask you, the first question is in two parts. The first part, what does the principle of inherent jurisdiction entail? And the second part, give three instances where the inherent jurisdiction of the High Court is ousted.
Thank you, Chief Justice and the commissioners. The principle of inherent jurisdiction of the High Court unlike the magistrate courts, it's not a creature of statute. Therefore, it has inherent jurisdiction and automatic jurisdiction on all matters within Zimbabwe, regardless of the region. And three instances where the inherent jurisdiction of the High Court can be ousted. Firstly, on matters of a constitutional nature. And secondly, in instances where, I'm not sure whether it's the jurisprudence of our courts that all matters happening within Zimbabwe, the ones that fall within the Western Division are dealt with in the Western Division, and the rest are dealt with in the Eastern Division. I can't think of the third instance.
The second question is also in two parts. The first part, name two situations provided for under the High Court Rules 2021 in which an order or judgment of the court may be rescinded. And the second part, what two requirements in respect of each type of case must a judge address before rescinding the order or judgment?
The first instance is where the judgment is obtained by default. And the second instance is where the order is obtained by a mistake of law. And two requirements for consideration in each of the instances is in the case of a default judgment to establish if the default was willful in the first instance, and the prospects of success on the merits. And in the event of judgment granted by mistake of law, one instance is where there is consent of the opposing party, and the other instance is where in fact the party raising or seeking rescission proves that in fact there was a mistake of law, and it's dealt with accordingly.
The third question is in three parts. The first part, what do you understand by the concept of presumptive penalty? And B, what is the difference between a presumptive penalty and a minimum mandatory sentence. And C, state two effects the sentencing guidelines have had on the criminal justice system.
The presumptive penalties are provided for by the National Sentencing Guidelines. And there are instances where the statute actually provides for a penalty. And then there is a presumptive penalty also provided for, which is in essence a guideline. In my view, it is a halfway house between the sentence prescribed by the statute and the suggested penalty in the guidelines. In which case, if there are no special circumstances, then the judicial officer ought to rely on the presumptive penalty as a bare minimum. And the difference with the minimum mandatory sentence is that, as the name suggests, the minimum mandatory sentence is the bare minimum prescribed, as it were. And it is mandatory. It doesn't matter whether there is no provision actually to consider the existence of special circumstances. Then the third part, the two effects of the sentencing guidelines on the justice system. One, they create uniformity. And secondly, they create predictability within the judicial system.
And the last question has two parts. The first part, state three principles that govern the conduct of virtual hearing proceedings in the High Court. Then B, what is the role of a judge in the adoption of a virtual hearing as a proceeding in the High Court?
The three principles governing the conduct of virtual proceedings. One is firstly, the ability of both parties, the attorney and the judicial officer presiding, to use virtual technology. And secondly, it is the presumption actually that all the system is properly functioning, and I can't think of the third. However, the role of the judge in adoption of the virtual proceedings in the High Court, firstly, is to promote expediency of the parties and to ensure accessibility to the judicial system to all practitioners. And thirdly, I will suggest is to promote the speedy finalization of matters.
Yes, thank you. I will now hand you over to the other commissioners for further questioning.
Thank you, CJ. Good afternoon.
Afternoon,
Yes.
Madam.
I have one question for you. I'm looking at the papers that are before us. in particular the form that you filled in concerning where you outlined the progression professionally that you have made since you left university. It would appear that most of the time you worked as a magistrate in Namibia?
That's correct.
And then never as a magistrate here in Zimbabwe?
That's correct.
Okay. And then that you came back from Namibia in 2021?
That's correct.
Yes. Okay. There is question number 3.1 where it required you to state whether you had appeared in the Constitutional Court, Supreme Court and High Court, and we are talking of those courts here in Zimbabwe. You didn't really give an answer. You simply put a date, 2001 to 2006. I mean a time frame. Have you had any experience in the Constitutional Court, Supreme Court or High Court of Zimbabwe?
No, I haven't appeared in the Constitutional Court nor the Supreme Court, but I had been appearing in the High Court.
Yes, in Bulawayo, is it?
Yes, in Bulawayo, and also here in Harare.
And in Harare, yes. Since 2001, sorry, 2021.
That's correct.
Since you came back 2 years ago.
No. Prior, since 2001,
this is prior
when I graduated.
2021.
That's correct.
Okay. So overall, given all that you have placed before us, the summation of your experience and so forth, do you think you are adequately qualified, prepared to assume the court, the position of judge of the High Court?
I think so.
Just very briefly, tell us why.
Yes. Firstly, my experience as a magistrate in Namibia, I was introduced to the electronic case management system as way back as 2010, and I got familiar with that process. And secondly, when I left the magistrates, I was a chief legal officer for the Director of Legal Aid. So I had vast experience appearing in the High Court of Namibia. And I took part in several trials, reported trials, which actually created some jurisprudence in that jurisdiction, which I find it also very applicable in Zimbabwe.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, CJ. It's a very small question, but very important. It also derives from the last commissioner's question. This pertains to your practice. In your employment history, you state that you are a senior partner for Dube and Company, and the period being 2003 to current. And whereas elsewhere, you are singling out a certain period which dates from 2008 to 12 as being in Namibia. So does this law firm operate across the border, or what is the position? I'm just curious.
Okay. Prior to that, I worked for Rescission of legal practitioners in Bulawayo when I graduated. And then I worked for Maronde Zenyati, still in Bulawayo. And then when I left Zimbabwe, I was actually contracted by the government of Namibia. But I was still a registered legal practitioner, and whenever I was in Zimbabwe, I appeared in court. I did practice while in Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Chief Justice, and good afternoon, Mr. Dube. My interest is on a submission that you say that you served in the Republic of Namibia as a district court magistrate. And the highlights of your service there, you do indicate, or one of the highlights, that you managed to clear the case backlog from over 2,000 matters on the roll per month to a mere 80. So what I wanted to find out is, was this an individual achievement, or you were leading a team of magistrates? So I just wanted to be clear on whether it was you achieved this reduction, or it was a team?
At the station, I was the only magistrate working with two prosecutors. The unique part of that, it was at a border town, and you handle a lot of immigration matters, and that place had stayed for 9 months without a magistrate. So, and then there was also unique matters such as matters relating to overloading, so which involves the Trade and Metrology Act, the use of measuring instruments. So we will deal with a lot of that, the bulk of that, and we had 2 periodical courts. So as the magistrate, I was the only person in charge of that, but I was reporting to a control magistrate who was in the next town, about 200.
Sorry, Mr. Dube, but my question is just that you cleared this 2,000 backlog as an individual. That's where my interest is.
That's exactly that.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Mr. Dube, you've given us a list of notable or noteworthy cases that you did in Namibia, but none in the High Court of Zimbabwe. Can you tell us of at least one matter that you have done in the High Court in Bulawayo?
Most of the matters I dealt with were actually, mostly it was divorce matters. I struggled to actually remember the names. But I then dealt with a lot of trials at the Wange Circuit of the High Court. I remember appearing before Justice Ndo, Justice Cheda, and Justice Kamonja.
I am actually more interested in cases you've done in the High Court since 2021, since you came back from Namibia.
No, I haven't dealt with any.
What is the nature of your practice?
There are junior practitioners who actually appear in court. My duties were limited to supervisory duties.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Honorable CJ. When you talked about orders which the High Court can rescind, did you say one of such orders would be an order made by a mistake of law?
Yes, a mistake of law in a situation where, especially where both parties actually discover that there was a misinterpretation of the law. For example, the common matters where the Marriage Act was improperly cited as the Marriages Act, when such an order is granted and then you realize it was actually based on the wrong law.
I'm answered, CJ. Thank you.
Thank you, CJ. Please advise us, appraise us of how a judge ensures fairness and impartiality in a judgment.
Well, unlike in private legal practice, whenever you receive a bundle of papers, you tend to study them from a point of bias. And you have disclosure before you enter the trial. You can synthesize the points that favor you and or your client, and the facts that are against your client. Now, as a judge, you are not privy to the facts. You sit there, open your mind, listen to whatever facts will be presented to you, and then the presentation of the law. Then you synthesize that fairly in a balanced manner, and arrive at a decision. That ensures fairness.
Thank you.
Thank you, CJ. I'm looking at your degree. I think your last degree was earned in 2001.
That's correct.
How have you managed to stay up to date with legal development and changes to the law? Any areas of capacity development that you are involved in?
Yes, I took part in training with the Black Lawyers Association of South Africa and the intermediate level and advanced trial advocacy course. And in between, I did a lot of specialized litigation courses, especially, like I said, when it comes to calibration of measuring instruments. And I also did workshops on child witnesses, training on human trafficking, and different other specialized fields. I used to attend training workshops on that.
Thank you, CJ.
Good afternoon, Mr. Dube. How would you respond in a situation where an accused person in a criminal trial requests you as the judge to refer to a constitutional court, an issue to a constitutional court?
Firstly, I will consider if the request for referral is not frivolous and vexatious, and if it's based on valid constitutional points, yes, I will be moved to make a referral.
Thank you, Mr. J.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Yes, earlier on, you said that you were introduced to ICMS as early as 2010 in Namibia.
That's correct.
Yes, but information that I have here is that when you did the first part, the first stage of this interview process, you failed to save and upload your final document.
That's correct.
Yes.
When I actually used the local version, I find it not to be user-friendly. For example, when you have to upload a document, it was identified as a letter. Yet it was a judgment, it wasn't a letter. And actually, you have to search it under miscellaneous activities. But in my view, a matter of the magnitude of a judgment, it doesn't fall under the miscellaneous proceedings. So I found it actually not to be as user-friendly as the system that I'm used to.
One last thing. In your CV, under achievements, you said other achievements, you mentioned that a registered legal practitioner since September 2001 to date. And I'm wondering, why are you listing that as an achievement? Is there something you're doing that we don't know? And you're actually surprised that you're still registered as a legal practitioner?
Yes, what I was emphasizing is that I have been a legal practitioner without any misdemeanors with the Law Society, which I find it to be
an achievement.
To be an achievement.
Thank you,
yes.
Chief Justice.
Yes, thank you. We have come to the end of your interview. You are excused.
I thank you, Chief Justice.